Eric Whitman had always believed in building things that lasted. As a civil engineer, he understood foundations, structure, and strength. But nothing mattered more to him than the life he built with Kayla, his high school sweetheart and wife of 30 years. They had weathered storms together, job losses, aging parents, the sleepless years of raising children. Through it all, Eric stayed steady, loyal. He brought Kayla her favorite tea on cold mornings, left her sticky notes with small jokes, and still looked at her like she was the girl he fell for in the school library. Their daughter, Marin, had recently married a quiet, respectful young man named Eli, and their son Gavin was thriving in college. Life wasn't exciting, but it was peaceful, predictable. Eric believed that was love, the kind that grows deeper over decades, rooted in care, not chaos. He didn't know that while he was holding everything together, Kayla had begun to drift. He didn't see the cracks forming because he trusted her. He believed that the life they shared, the family they'd nurtured, and the history they created was enough to keep them both grounded. Looking back, that trust would be both his greatest strength and his deepest wound. It was supposed to be a simple favor, one of those little husband-wife moments that happen without thought. Kayla had mentioned her phone was acting strange, apps crashing and messages not sending. Eric, never tech-savvy but always the default fixer in their house, took the phone with a chuckle and a sense of routine. The screen was already unlocked, and as he sat at the dining table scrolling through the settings, his eyes caught something he couldn't unsee, a message thread with Eli, their son-in-law. At first, curiosity guided his thumb, nothing more. But within seconds, curiosity turned into a dizzying spiral of disbelief. Flirtation, secrets, explicit photos. The words were like poison on the screen. I need you again. Last night wasn't enough. Kayla, when can I see you alone? Eric's hands turned to ice. The room faded into silence as his heart pounded so hard it seemed to echo in his ears. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a wound carved through every sacred thing he believed in. Marriage, fatherhood, family. The messages weren't from a week ago. They stretched back months. Like a slow-burning fire that had now erupted into full destruction. Kayla had taken the one man Eric had trusted with his daughter's life and invited him into a secret life of betrayal. Every word on that screen sliced into him, sharp and personal. And in that moment, everything he thought he knew about his wife, his family, his world began to quietly collapse. Eric didn't confront Kayla right away. He couldn't. The shock had numbed his senses, leaving his body moving on autopilot while his mind reeled in chaos. He muttered something vague about needing to pick up nails from the hardware store and walked out of the house, leaving her in the kitchen humming over a pot of stew. He drove aimlessly for hours, the city blurring past his windshield, headlights melting into streaks of disbelief. At one point, he pulled over in a grocery store parking lot and just sat there, hands trembling, staring into nothing. His thoughts ran wild. Memories flooding in of anniversary dinners, hospital waiting rooms, nights spent cradling crying babies, mornings watching the sunrise together in silence. All of it now tainted, contaminated by what he'd seen. How could she look him in the eye each day while living a double life? How could she smile and say, I love you, while texting their daughter's husband in secret? Eric felt something inside him rupture, not just heartbreak, but a kind of spiritual injury, as if the core of who he was had been cracked open. Trust had always been his default, the ground beneath his feet. But now that ground was gone. When he finally returned home, hours later, the house looked the same, but everything inside him had shifted. Kayla greeted him casually, as if nothing had changed. She didn't even ask about the phone. That silence, that forgetfulness, it told Eric more than words ever could. The moment Eric sat across from Kayla, he knew this would be the hardest conversation of his life. The house was quiet. Warm light spilling across the kitchen floor like nothing had changed, except everything had. She looked up from the television with a half smile, asking, Did you fix my phone? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied her face, so familiar, so trusted, and now so foreign. I saw your messages with Eli, he said, his voice calm, but tight as piano wire. Instantly, the color drained from her face. Her mouth opened, then closed again, as if searching for a lie convincing enough to erase what had already been read. She allowed a shaky laugh, a reflex of denial. What are you talking about? But Eric cut through it. Don't insult me, Kayla. I saw everything. Her eyes filled with tears, whether from guilt or exposure. He couldn't tell, and she began to spin a web of reasons. It just happened. He was struggling. I felt invisible. I didn't know how to stop. But Eric wasn't listening for excuses. He asked the one question breaking him in half. Why him? Our daughter's husband. Her response, halting and thin, was a confession of selfish longing, of feeling desirable again, of craving something new. But to Eric, it sounded like betrayal wrapped in vanity. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He simply stood, retrieved a suitcase from the closet, and began packing. 30 years, undone by whispers in the dark. And he was done begging to be respected. Eric stared at his phone for what felt like an eternity, his thumb hovering over the screen as doubt battled duty. How do you tell your daughter that her mother and husband have shattered everything sacred? How do you ruin someone's world to save them from a deeper lie? But in the end, the answer was clear. Maren deserved the truth. She deserved the chance to decide her own future, not live a fiction woven by deceit. His message was brief, heavy with unspoken sorrow. Maren, I'm so sorry. I found messages between Mom and Eli. I've left the house and will be filing for divorce. I love you, and I'm here when you're ready to talk. He hit send, turned off the phone, and sat in silence. When he powered it back on 6 hours later, the screen exploded with calls and texts, Kayla's desperate pleas, Eli's panicked threats, and most heartbreaking of all, Maren's confused, devastated messages. He called her immediately. She answered on the first ring, her voice raw from crying. Dad, please tell me this isn't real. Her heartbreak was visceral. A daughter grappling not only with betrayal, but with the collapse of the two people she trusted most. Eric listened as she sobbed, as she recounted confronting Eli and kicking him out. I can't believe she did this to me, she whispered. Eric's heart broke anew. Neither can I, sweetheart, but you're not alone. I'm with you every step of the way. And in that pain, something sacred was rebuilt, truth between a father and his daughter. The days that followed felt like a storm with no clear end. Word of Kayla's affair spread quickly, despite Eric's efforts to keep it private. In a town where everyone knows your name, and your business, rumors have wings. Friends, neighbors, even parents at the school where Kayla taught began whispering behind cupped hands. Her carefully crafted image, the devoted wife, the beloved teacher, the warm community volunteer, began to unravel thread by thread. She took a sudden leave of absence from work, claiming health reasons, but Eric knew it was shame that had driven her into hiding. Meanwhile, Eli was swiftly dismissed from the company where Eric held sway. The idea of working alongside the man who had desecrated his family was unthinkable. Elias reputation creteret. He struggled to find new work, his charm no longer enough to mask the truth that now clung to him like smoke. Eric, however, moved through the fallout with quiet resolve. He found a small, furnished apartment on the other side of town. Cold and unfamiliar, it felt more like a waiting room than a home, but at least it was his. Gavin, home from college briefly, visited him there. They sat in silence more than they spoke, the weight of betrayal hanging between them like fog. I don't know what to say, Dad, Gavin murmured. Eric placed a hand on his son's shoulder. You don't have to say anything. Just being here, it matters. Amid the wreckage, love still lived, wounded but unshaken. And Eric clung to that. Just when Eric thought he had seen the full measure of betrayal, the knife twisted deeper. Weeks into the legal separation, his lawyer called with a tone of restrained urgency. Kayla was contesting the divorce. She claimed emotional instability, citing depression and a desperate need for marital counseling before any legal decisions could be made. It was a move designed not to heal, but to stall, to muddy the waters with sympathy and cast Eric as the emotionally distant husband who drove her into Eli's arms. The courtroom air was thick with tension as Kayla's attorney painted a picture of a woman neglected and unheard. Eric sat motionless, jaw clenched. Every word she spoke another distortion of their shared history. But then, the unexpected happened. An email arrived from Eli. Its subject line was chilling. The truth about Kayla. Against his better judgment, Eric opened it. Eli admitted everything. Not just the affair, but how Kayla had initiated it. How she had called Eli her way out. Seduced him under the guise of helping him through his marriage problems. How she had orchestrated their rendezvous with full intent. Attached were voice recordings. Kayla's voice, unmistakable. Laughing, plotting, calling Hazel naive and Eric clueless. Eric felt his heart drop as he listened, both vindicated and hollowed. There was no more gray area, only truth, sharp and cold. He forwarded everything to his attorney. Within 48 hours, Kayla's team dropped the contest. The mask had fallen, and in its place stood the real story. Unfiltered, unmerciful, undeniable. With the legal battle finally behind him, Eric found himself in unfamiliar territory. Freedom. Not the kind wrapped in confetti and cheers, but a quiet, tender kind, born from pain and perseverance. He rented a modest loft downtown, walls bare, kitchen minimalist, but there was something comforting in its emptiness. It was his. No secrets lingered in its corners. He started small, morning walks with Bramble, the rescue dog he adopted on impulse, then late-night dinners with takeout and old jazz records playing softly in the background. Therapy became a weekly ritual, not to fix him, but to help him rediscover the man who had gotten lost somewhere in the fog of betrayal. He joined a cooking class, mostly out of necessity, but soon found joy in learning to make things with his hands that didn't involve blueprints or building permits. It was there he met Teresa, a graceful woman with a knowing smile and a laugh that sounded like healing. They didn't rush anything. Shared coffee turned into walks, then dinners, then conversations about everything and nothing. He told her about Kayla one evening, voice steady. She didn't flinch. "You survived," she said, simply. Marin, now thriving in Seattle, called regularly. She sounded lighter each time, rediscovering herself one day at a time. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said during one call. And Eric, standing in his tiny kitchen with pasta boiling and a dog at his feet, realized something quietly beautiful. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living again. A year after his world unraveled, Eric sat across from Teresa at their favorite quiet cafe. The kind with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. They weren't officially anything, no labels, no pressure, but something steady had grown between them, something patient and real. Teresa, also divorced, understood the slow rebuilding of a life. There was no rush to fill the silence. They simply let it be. Eric had come a long way from the hollow man who packed his suitcase in stunned betrayal. He had found comfort in his new routines, Sunday racquetball with coworkers, evenings spent experimenting in the kitchen, mornings walking Bramble along the quiet trails by the river. He had even accepted a partnership at his firm, a goal he'd shelved long ago while prioritizing family. Gavin came by more often now, their dinners filled with cautious laughter and mutual respect. Marin, flourishing in Seattle, had started dating again. "I met someone, Dad," she shared over the phone, her voice both nervous and excited. Eric smiled. "You deserve joy, sweetheart. Just make sure he calls you his entire world." Their bond, once fractured by betrayal, had grown stronger in honesty. Teresa's presence, subtle and grounding, brought light back into Eric's eyes. One evening, while watching a storm roll in from his porch, Eric turned to her and said, "I never imagined happiness would look like this." She smiled, took his hand, and replied, "That's because you never gave up on building something true." And for once, the future felt wide open. That Christmas, Eric hosted a small gathering in his home, a place that no longer felt like a waiting room, but a sanctuary he had made his own. Marin flew in from Seattle, glowing with newfound confidence. Gavin brought his quiet wit and thoughtful presence. Teresa and her daughter joined, folding into the family dynamic with surprising ease. The table buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and stories that danced over candlelight. It wasn't the holiday Eric had imagined a year ago, but in many ways, it was better, real, earned, unforced. After dinner, as the others migrated to the living room for coffee and cookies, Marin pulled Eric aside. "I saw Mom yesterday," she said softly. She apologized, again, and asked if you were happy. Eric met his daughter's eyes. "What did you tell her?" Marin smiled gently. "That you're building something good, that you deserve every bit of happiness." Eric looked into the next room, at the faces that now made up his world, and felt a deep, unwavering peace. The past hadn't vanished, but it no longer defined him. In its place stood something new, strength, clarity, and a life not just survived, but reclaimed. In today's world, where trust can be fragile and betrayal often comes from those closest to us, Eric's story reminds us of the power of truth, boundaries, and self-respect. If you're facing heartbreak or deception, know that walking away from what breaks you is not weakness, it's wisdom. Healing doesn't come from pretending everything's fine. Never settle for being someone's afterthought when you deserve to be someone's whole beginning.